I don't know what art is, but I know what I like. Hi, this is Emerald and welcome to the Diamond Net. And today I want to talk to you about the question, what is art? Now, if you've been following my channel, you might think that this is a bit off topic. My channel is more geared toward consciousness expansion and also exploring different things in society and in the individual in order to raise awareness. But I think that this question actually ties in perfectly with my channel because it illuminates a lot of the social undercurrents that we have. In fact, the question, what is art, is incredibly prevalent throughout the art world and through society in general. Now, if we're going to talk about the bare bones definition of art, if we talk about it in an actual, like, what are the objects of art, paintings are colors smeared on a flat surface. Sculptures are different materials reconstituted or molded in a particular way. Video art is things being recorded, and performance artwork is people doing things. Or maybe we could even say that art is a three-letter word that begins with the letter A and ends with the letter T. But many artists, art critics, and art professors, and people in general, might find these answers to be underwhelming and not really satisfying. And that's because they're not really asking the question, what is art? They're really asking the question, why is art important? Or why are art objects more important than any other object? The entire question of what is art is an attempt to slap a dogma on top of art that makes it be seen as important to external society. All the philosophies surrounding the question of what art is a kind of mental masturbation and desperate grasping to be able to cast art in an important light. It's a bunch of people in the art world trying to squint their eyes and blur their vision in order to see clothes on an otherwise naked emperor. Now, when I was in college, I studied fine art, and so I am well acquainted with the subject of art, but this video really isn't about art itself. It's about that question of what is art and what the social ideas are, the unconscious social ideas that actually feed into the question, what is art? Now, the reason why this question is asked so often is because in our society, we feel like everything has to serve a particular purpose. Utilitarianism and individuality are the highest gods, and so we try to frame everything in relation to those two concepts. So we try to make everything mean something, and we try to fit everything in a nice little box. Now, to some degree, this is very, very natural for human beings to do. In fact, our brain is split into two hemispheres. On the left brain, that's the more logical side. That's the side that ascribes meaning to things. It has to do with language and logical, rational thinking. Now, on the right side of the brain, that deals with creativity, ambiguity, and non-linear thinking. Now, these two hemispheres of the brain are connected in the center by a bundle of nerves called the corpus callosum, and information is sent globally across both of those hemispheres. But the problem in our society is that we overvalue the functions of the left side of the brain over the functions of the right side of the brain. So it is our left brain that assigns meaning to things, but we buy too much into the meanings that our left side of the brain puts on things without experiencing the reality for what it is, without being able to embrace the ambiguity that the right side of the brain creates. Now, in the 1960s, there was a surgeon named Joe Bogan, and he was doing amazing work with patients who suffered chronic seizures. And what he ended up doing was he went in and he would perform brain surgery, and he would sever the corpus callosum, that bundle of nerves that I talked about, between the left and the right hemisphere, so that those two hemispheres were able to work independently of one another. And so what that did was it actually kept the seizure from spreading to all parts of the brain. It kept it isolated in one particular hemisphere. Now, despite the relative success of this procedure, there were some very peculiar occurrences. Like, one thing they discovered from this was that the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body, and that the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. And often in these patients, those two things would work autonomously from one another. So the left side of the body would often do things without the person being consciously or rationally aware of it, because that information was being channeled directly from the right side of the brain, which deals with the less concrete, more ambiguous type things. So research was conducted on these particular patients to study into the nature of the left and right side of the brain. So what the researcher would do is they would have the patient stare at a dot directly in the middle of a screen, and then on either side of the screen, the left or the right, they would flash an image or a word up very, very quickly. And so on the left side of the screen, what they found is that if they flashed a picture onto the left side of the screen and then they asked what was in the picture, that the person wasn't able to verbally give that information back, because the verbal aspect is part of the left side of the brain, which controls the right side of the body. So the left side of the brain was not able to access the information that flashed up on the left side. After that, they took the experiment a little bit further to test exactly how these two things synthesize information together. And so they would have the patient stare at that dot in the middle of the screen again, but then they would flash up two different images. An example of this that was given in what I was reading in the happiness hypothesis was that on one side they would flash up a chicken's claw, and on the other side they would flash up a house that was covered in snow, two completely unrelated images. And then afterward, they would have a person point with their left hand and their right hand which image the chicken claw corresponded to. And so with their right hand, which is controlled by their left brain, they would relate the chicken claw back to a chicken. So they would point to the picture of a chicken. With their left hand, which is controlled by the right brain, that ambiguous, non-meaning side of the brain, they would point to a shovel because you shovel snow. Now, what's really, really interesting about this is that whenever they asked why they chose that image, they wouldn't say, oh, it's probably because my right brain saw that and I'm not getting it because of that. They would make up a meaning. They would actually confabulate a meaning out of thin air. So it would be like, oh, well, the chicken claw relates to a chicken and you need a shovel to shovel out the chicken coop. So where the left side of the brain sees no meaning, it will automatically place a meaning on top of things, even if none is there. And so that's where this idea, what is art, comes from. It's our left side of the brain wanting to make meaning out of something that's inherently right-brained, like art. Now, our society is particularly obsessed with left brain thinking. For us, everything either has to A, serve a purpose, or B, prop up our self-concept. It has to have a function of some kind. So because we see art objects as being non-utilitarian, like we don't necessarily use art objects for anything, then it must contribute something to our individuality. So if we understand art as something that does not have a direct utilitarian purpose, we'll try to make something up that makes it useful. We'll try to find some way that it feeds into our self-concept. We try to make a purpose for it. So for both utility and individuality, the idea of hierarchy has to come into the picture. Like what differentiates a work of art from a craft project, or what differentiates a piece of art from an object that's just in the trash. So we're trying to place these meanings on top of art to give it an objective value, an inherent value when none really exists. But meaning and value are not inherent qualities in the world. They are ideas that people put on top of things to have a better understanding of reality and to be able to look at things in a more black and white way. So the answer is that art is truly nothing. Art is an arbitrary distinction that is created by the left brain so that people can make sense out of something that doesn't make sense. The truth is that we need to feel like art actually means something and is important externally, otherwise the entire institution of art would collapse. If people couldn't go to the museum and sip their wine and eat their cheese and scratch their chin in the name of their own personality and refinement, then people would be a lot less compelled to look at the objects. Most people have lost the ability to look at art in a way that does not serve their own ego's self-agenda. Like very few adults still have the ability to look at images in the same way that a child looks at images. Now, as an artist, I feel like I don't enjoy the experience of looking at art as much as I think I should. For me, I enjoy creating art, I enjoy analyzing art, and I enjoy kind of postulating about the artist's intentions or their experience, but I don't necessarily get a lot of enjoyment out of just looking. Like, I remember a time when I was a child where the joy of looking was so grand to me. Like, I used to watch cartoons, and I remember thinking, why do adults even watch live action movies when they can just look out in reality and see the same thing? For me, it was very important that the images were created and the plot lines were like a sub point. I just think that there are so many images in society, and we're just seeing billions and billions and billions of images during our lifetime, that we get desensitized to it and we can't really enjoy looking at an image in the way that we used to enjoy it. So I think very often people go to museums to bolster their self-image, to feel like they are sophisticated, to feel like they know something about high art. Since beauty was largely replaced by relativism at the onset of modern art, I don't think that the high art institution would survive today if it just became about the joy of looking at objects. I think if it didn't serve the self-concept of its creators and its viewers, that it would really collapse as an institution. Now, this fact is very, very threatening for anyone working in the field of art. Artists, art professors, curators, anybody who works in a museum, they're really living on thin ice. They're living off of the fact that everybody accepts that art has some special quality to it. They're living off of the fact that it's kind of like everybody accepts the emperor's new clothes. The entire art institution is, in a sense, riding on the back of the cult of individuality and the cult of utilitarianism in a very feeble way, because these things are seen as unquestionably good in our society's eyes. And these ideas get to us very, very young, too. So, for example, when I was 9 years old, I went to Busch Gardens, and I remember thinking, like, what is the purpose of having fun? And why is it more fun to be here than to be other places? And in a sense, that was one of the first nails in the coffin for me in terms of embracing the uncertainty and the non-reason behind fun and joy. I had already unconsciously learned that everything needed to be cross-referenced under the ideas of utilitarianism and hierarchy, and so a lot of uncomfortable questions came up to me, like what is fun for, and why is it better to feel happiness as opposed to any other emotion? I started to question things that really didn't have an answer that I could grab a hold of. Because I really couldn't grab a hold of a particular truth, and I had learned that it's better to be right than to be uncertain, I just sort of thought, well, clearly love and fun and happiness, they're maybe not the most important things in life. Maybe there are more sensible things to be focused on. Maybe there are other ways to understand the world that are more important. But those are the things that make life worth living, and life loses all flavor if we reject uncertainty and nonlinear thinking in order to just have cognitive closure and order in the way we think of things. So instead of asking what is art, I recommend that we ask a better question. And in order to ask a better question, we have to first acknowledge that art objects are not any more inherently important than any other object in the world. The more important question that we have to ask ourselves is, why do people create in the first place? If utilitarianism and individuality aren't necessary components and inherent components of creating art, then what is our motivation behind creating it? Clearly there's a motivation. We've done it since the beginning of humanity. But what is it? The truth of the matter is that creating art is part of our lower, more earthly nature. It's one of our instincts, and it doesn't necessarily have to have a particular outcome, and it doesn't have to serve a higher purpose. It is just something that people do. Now, art can serve a higher purpose, like individuality can be expressed through art, like it can serve higher purposes, but the creation and manifestation aspect of art is part of our instinctual nature. We like to make things. Perhaps a more honest way to look at art is to question what it actually gives to the creator. I think it's human instinct for a person when they imagine something to want those things to exist in reality. So in that sense, art serves as a bridge between the internal world of thoughts and emotions and the outer three-dimensional world. Human beings have a creator nature. We want the world to conform to our ideas of the world, and so we begin to create things in order to make that so. Now this includes art, but it also includes different things like our infrastructure and the objects that we sell in stores. There's really not too much that separates those two things, other than the fact that our buildings and infrastructure and other objects have an external purpose and art does not. Now this seems pretty bleak for art, but it's really not. People have always created art and will continue to create art because it's a human instinct. However, I say embrace the uncertainty because the uncertainty is where all of the power is in art. Through the power of uncertainty and open-endedness, art becomes a perfect nesting ground for new wisdom to emerge. In fact, art has often been on the cutting edge of philosophical and scientific breakthroughs throughout the ages. This is why I consider myself truly fortunate to have gone to college for art, because at the place that I was studying at, it was a lot more about unlearning than learning. It was a lot about chucking out preconceived notions about what art is to really get down to what was important to me. Now, it was still peppered with enough dogma to sustain itself in the eyes of the institution, but it was at a very, very minimal level, and I was really able to explore a lot of things, and in that sense, it was even more ripe for producing insights than if I were to study theology or psychology or philosophy or any other of the humanities. So even though the objects of art themselves have no inherent value, the process of creating yields many, many treasures for artist and spectator alike. So as people and as artists, when we learn to detach our work from the ideas of hierarchy and importance, and we can embrace the possibility that comes from non-meaning and non-importance, that's when we can make real breakthroughs in our work. That's where the important insights from art and from life come about. So don't invalidate things that have no meaning. Because meaning is something that only exists in the mind, meanings that we place on things are usually arbitrary anyway. So leave your cup empty. Don't get caught up in arguments about whether the emperor's shirt is nicer or whether the emperor's pants are nicer. The fact of the matter is that he's naked. Just see reality for what it is and be willing to create without the need for social validation. Embrace the nonsense in your actions. The cricket doesn't rub its legs together to create its magnum opus. It rubs its legs together because it's a cricket. Well, that's all I have for you for now. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and click the subscribe button below and give me a big thumbs up. Otherwise, make sure you post your questions and comments below. Every other Wednesday I have a Q&A segment where I answer questions directly from my subscribers. Otherwise, again, I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, keep becoming more you.